Hey, seventh graders. Welcome back to another day of e-learning. Today we're going more in depth into the Cold War, finding out today about the Korean War. So you're going to watch a video that mostly I created. Going to go over, again, just an overview of how it started, some details about it. Then I'm going to show you a 4.5-minute video from Simple History, the Korean War. And then I want to go into a little bit of more information about, was this a pointless war? You're going to see reasons why there wasn't a point, reasons why there was a point. So in the end, I want you to decide, was this a pointless war? Then I'm going to show you the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C., and the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone. And then finally, I'm going to ask you to take an exit slip. You're not going to have to worry about writing anything down, again, doing any kind of reading notes. You're just going to take that exit slip, and that's it. Mr. Newk's bad joke of the day. What do you call a liar on the phone? A telephony. My jokes are getting worse and worse every day. Enjoy some learning. Email if you got questions. So let's focus on the Korean War. Here are 4 different maps. In a moment, we're going to come back to these maps, remembering, of course, that red symbolizes communism, and this kind of bluish, more purplish color will symbolize non-communism or democracy. So let's start first with, where is Korea located? So Korea is located all the way over here, approximately 6,671 miles from the United States. So close to not quite a third of the way, more like a quarter of the way around the world. So it is quite far away from the United States, Korea. So this takes us back to the Truman Doctrine. Remember the United States? Truman Doctrine, Harry Truman says the United States, our new foreign policy will be containment. The U.S. will stop the spread of communism. Any country threatened by communism, doesn't matter if it is in the Western Hemisphere, Eastern Hemisphere, Korea, doesn't matter. Any country threatened by communism, the United States will come to the aid of that country. So here we go with our maps. So it all starts, initially, you've got to go back to the history of Korea. After World War II, there is joint occupation of Korea. The Soviet Union decides they're going to occupy the northern part of Korea, while the United States decides that they are going to occupy the southern part, with the understanding that eventually they're going to try to unify it. Well, they are not able to come to any kind of an agreement. Of course, the Soviets want it to be communist. Of course, America wants it to be non-communist. So North Korea, with the support of the Soviet Union, in particular Joseph Stalin, they send weapons. The Soviet Union sends weapons to North Korea and basically aid, and they now have permission to invade South Korea to try to unify it as one communist peninsula. So that's what happens right here. The invasion starts, and now you can see they are quite successful. They are able to drive all the way down to the corner of the Korean peninsula. And this is the point at which the United States, this was a surprise, they didn't know it was coming. They're able to go in front of the United Nations. The United Nations is against this move by North Korea, again, supported by the Soviet Union. So the United States and several other countries end up putting together an army under the flag of the United Nations. They now come back. They enter in at this port of Incheon, it's called, and they're going to push all the way back to almost the Yalu River, which is the border, the official border of China. Now, General MacArthur, he says, let's just keep this thing going. Let's go all the way into China. Let's drop atomic bombs. Let's get rid of communism in China. Now, go back. What is the foreign policy of the United States? It is not to eliminate communism. It is simply to contain communism. But now you just upset the most populated country in the world. So now China decides they're going to send 250,000 troops into North Korea to support the North Koreans. So China will physically fight on the side of the North Koreans. The Soviet Union will provide support, but never actually fight. And now they're going to drive all the way right back to this 38th parallel. So this is November of 1950. So now we get into a stalemate. For the next 3 years of the war, you're going to notice really very little change at all. In fact, by the end of the war, 1953, you will end in approximately the same place you started, and that will be the 38th parallel. That is a line of latitude. All right, I want to show you guys a quick video. It's called Korean War Simple History, and it's going to do a better job explaining than I just did, and then we'll go into a few more things with the Korean War.
The Korean War, June 25, 1950 through July 27, 1953. At the end of World War II in 1945, Korea was freed from Japanese control. North Korea was occupied by the Soviets while the South was occupied by American forces. By 1948, the country was divided in half at the 38th parallel, with the capitalist South ruled by Syngman Rhee and the communist North ruled by Kim Il-sung. The Soviet troops withdrew from Korea in 1948, and U.S. troops withdrew in 1949. However, North and South Korea, as enemies of one another, would not accept the border between them as permanent. The North Koreans attacked South Korea on June 25, 1950, advancing across the 38th parallel. Around 75,000 troops of the North Korean People's Army defeated the Republic of Korea's army with success, capturing the capital city of Seoul, then occupying the whole of South Korea except for Busan. This was a problem, as President Truman and the United States wanted to contain the spread of communism by preventing the domino effect. That is, if Korea fell, so would other countries to the ideology. South Korea appealed for support, and the United States pushed a resolution through the United Nations Security Council. The USSR did not use its veto power, as it was boycotting the council because the new communist China was not accepted. In China's seat was the pro-US Chinese nationalist government of Taiwan. An appeal was made by the Security Council for North Korea to withdraw its troops, but was ignored. As a result, approval was granted for a UN army made up of an international force of 16 nations to send help to South Korea, commanded by General Douglas MacArthur. The UN troops, composed mainly of Americans, landed in South Korea in early July, but were soon pushed back on the defense by the North Korean forces, forming a perimeter around Busan to defend the line until reinforcements arrived in August. Now that their position was strengthened, MacArthur went on the offensive. On September 15th, the U.S. Marines X-Corps launched an amphibious assault at Incheon. The North Korean troops were pushed back on the retreat over the 38th parallel, and soon Seoul was recaptured along with the whole of South Korea by the end of the month. Now, MacArthur was to go beyond the initial idea of containment. Truman, worried of a Chinese response, nevertheless approved, and UN troops moved into North Korea on October 7, 1950. On October 12th, they captured Pyongyang, the North Korean capital, and then the Yalu River, which was the border with communist China. China retaliated by helping the North Koreans, sending 250,000 Chinese troops. The UN troops, overwhelmed by this new force, were pushed out of North Korea with heavy losses. By January 1951, Chinese and North Korean troops had captured Seoul. General MacArthur wanted to use the atom bomb on China and was dismissed for insubordination by President Truman, who went back to a policy of containment. In June 1951, more UN troops were sent to Korea, eventually driving the North Korean army to the 38th parallel and stabilizing the front. Now, a stalemate set in. In July, peace talks began, but a compromise could not be found. Meanwhile, fighting continued, and American pilots fought in the air against Soviet pilots using Chinese jet fighters and wearing Chinese uniforms. General Dwight D. Eisenhower took over as president in early 1953 and sought an end to the war. After 2 years of negotiation, an armistice was signed on July 27, 1953, at Panmunjom on the 38th parallel. A demilitarized zone was set up, which stands to this day. Subscribe and click the notification bell for more history videos. Thank you guys for all your support on the Simple History YouTube channel. If you enjoy it, please consider visiting our Patreon page. There, you can show us your support for the channel by donating and make a huge difference in what we're able to create for you. Plus, you can get early access on upcoming videos. So let's keep it growing And thank you for being part of this amazing community.
On either side, you have 53 to 54,000 Americans will die. You're going to end in the same place where you started. The U.S. does not defeat communism in North Korea, as it at one point in the war had attempted to do. This is 6,000, 7,000 miles away, and you spent almost $20 billion to end up in the same spot where you started. But then you have to ask yourself, what's the U.S. foreign policy? And the U.S. foreign policy is to contain communism, to not let it spread. And even though it went on for 3 years, from 1950 to 1953, in the end, the U.S. accomplished its mission of stopping the spread of communism. But more importantly, the message you send to the Soviet Union. You send a clear message that you are serious about the threat of communism, and you will use whatever resources necessary to stop the spread of communism. So it's just as important, the message you send to the Soviet Union. Let's take a look at the Korean War Memorial in Washington, D.C. This is located right next to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall. And you've got these life-size soldiers. You're not able to actually get too close. If you look in the background, there's a fence, so you're not able to like walk and stand next to them. As with all memorials, they look better at night. So if you ever get a chance, if you're lucky enough to go to Washington, D.C., check out the memorials at night. You've got this neat wall with actual soldiers that fought in the Korean War, and it's almost like hologram mirror images of them. That's so you can see the proximity of the statues to that wall. Again, another neat one at night. All right, and then finally, this takes us to the DMZ, the Demilitarized Zone, the 2.5 miles in between North and South Korea. It's created as a little buffer zone between the two because you always have high tensions between North Korea and South Korea. So this is your DMZ. It's a 160-mile stretch, 2.5 miles wide, guarded by, so you have armed guards on either side. This is the location where North and South Korea will go to meet and discuss, so that they're not clearly in one country or the other. They'll go into that demilitarized zone. So demilitarized means no military, whatever guns, weapons are, conflict is allowed to take place within that DMZ zone. So again, that is the border of North and South Korea today. All right, now I'm gonna have you guys take an exit slip on the Korean War. There's nothing else that you guys have to do other than take that exit slip. Good luck. Email if you got any.
Thanks for watching. Email Mr. Nemec if you have any questions.